Good afternoon, friends. I see we're getting fewer and fewer people on a Tuesday. We have to revisit this, whether we should continue with this or not, I think, but maybe not. Let me not ask that now. We'll do a poll at some point. Good afternoon, everybody. I see we have Willie, Sandile, Jason, and Frans on the call. Jason is in his car. That's why he's on his phone. But so welcome to this call. Willie, it's always good to look you in the eye. I know you always in die hoogvoer posisie gereed. But today we have the business coach with us. And I had a little chat with Cole before the time, but he did not disclose anything to me with regards to what he's going to entertain us with today. And Cole, we're so appreciative of what you're doing. And that franchise summit that you gave us into is amazing. There were a few stunning sessions in there. So thank you for allowing us on there. And we really appreciate the work that you do, helping people getting their ducks in a row so that they can do business. And we appreciate you and your skills and that you come and share that with us. And so without further ado, let me shut up and give over to Cole.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's great to spend time with you guys. And hopefully I'm not going to entertain you. Hopefully I'm going to challenge you today rather than entertain you. So cool. Yeah, it's good to be with you. I must say that these 6 weeks go past so quickly. I think about, it feels like just the other day when I was with you guys again. And then when you look again, it's another session, it's another month that's gone past. Time is moving really fast. And that brings me to what I'd like to talk to you guys about today. And the subject for today is on decision making. And when we look at making decisions, how do we make decisions in terms of what we need to do, where we need to focus, and then what kind of results we're expecting. So when we think about making decisions, when you're in business, every decision you make has, in fact, in life, every decision you make has a consequence. When you're in business, the decisions you make have major consequences, and the consequences or the results of your decisions could make or break you. It could determine whether you go under or whether you flourish. And so how do we make a decision, an informed decision, in the best possible way? Often I find that guys that we work with, businesses we work with, clients we work with in the coaching environment get stuck. And so they don't make decisions. They get into a position where it's the same stuff happening every day. And we just rolling over every day. We're not changing much, and when we do change, if we change, it's a tiny little bit, but we just like hanging on almost for dear life. And if we're fortunate enough that what we did yesterday worked, and we'll just keep doing it again today and tomorrow and for the rest of the year. And sometimes what we did yesterday didn't work, but we still keep doing the same thing again today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the year. And we know we're going to get the same results. We know that nothing is going to change, but we keep doing it because we're in that stuck mode. And you get into a stuck mode, almost like a freeze mode, because of fear, because of there's a variety of stuff that puts you into that mode where we don't change. Everything just stays the same. So when we look at making decisions, there are a couple of things that I want us to discuss now and just talk about. And this is really just a discussion. It's not like I'm going to give you a formula and from now onwards you'll know exactly how to make a decision and it'll be a win every time. There is no such formula. But what I can do is I can give you some things to think about, some things to consider when making a decision, so that your decisions are based on a clear mind, number one, on focus, number two. In other words, clarity. I've got clarity in terms of what I'm making a decision on. I'm able to focus on the right things at the right time, and I'm going to see results. There are going to be results, because it's no good making a decision and there's no results. The results must be favorable, and if they're not, then we need to go back and revisit the decision and amend and adjust. So when we talk about decisions, there's a talk that I did many years ago. When I say many years, it's probably about 15 years ago. And the talk was called, Your Biggest Obstacle is or your biggest liability or obstacle is often your greatest asset. And the talk was based on three concepts, or three kinds of, three inputs, if I could call it that. And the inputs are hindsight, insight, and foresight. And I looked at that from a perspective of, we often look at our own life and our own situation, and we see obstacles, we see challenges, we see things that are holding us back and stopping us. And most of the times they're in our own mind. And these obstacles or these liabilities, we draw them from our lacks, or our perceived lack, our perceived incompetence, if you want to call it that. So I'm looking at myself and I'm saying, okay, so I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at that, or I can't do this, or this is not a strength, or we can never achieve that. And those are obstacles. And when I look at those obstacles, they stop me. I'm frozen. They put me into a fear mode. They put me into this freeze kind of mode. We've spoken about fight, flight, or freeze many times. And so these things that are going on in my head, these conversations that I have, these ideas and these thoughts that I have, put me into that fight, flight, freeze mode. Most of the time it's a freeze mode, so we don't actually move forward. And I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at my own challenges, and I'm saying, this, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I'll never be able to, or this is not for me, or we can't, or our business can't, or we don't have the capacity, or we don't have the money, all of those kind of obstacles. And those things become a liability. They become the main influencer of our decisions. When in actual fact, if we took all of those obstacles and we looked at them and we said, hang on, this obstacle or liability that I'm perceiving in my own mind to be an obstacle or a liability could in actual fact be my biggest asset. It could in fact be my biggest strength or my biggest opportunity. Because in that there's an opportunity, in that block, in that reason why I can't, that excuse is a problem. And we all know, you've heard me say it many times, that when there's a problem and we are able to overcome the problem, it puts us into a different category. People pay heaps of money to have their problems solved. So oftentimes we look at problems around us and we think these problems can't be solved. But if we start thinking about ways to solve them, then we become valuable, because we can solve problems. People pay lots of money to have their problems solved, and if I can solve problems, then I'm moving forward. If there are no problems around me and I've got no problems to solve, then you've got a massive problem because you won't have a business and yet you can't move forward. So welcome those problems, welcome those obstacles, and don't see them as obstacles, see them as opportunities, see them as assets. Because in that, I often looked at my liabilities and I thought to myself, I can't do it because of that. And I'll give you a good example. I owned a Vodacom franchise, and I remember it was a small store. We were in a strip mall. We weren't in a major mall, so there weren't big malls around. And we were a small outlet. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, I can't compete with these big guys. I can't compete with the Vodacares and the Vodashops in the massive malls, because they've got a massive account, so they've got huge stock holding. They've got lots of staff members that work for them. They've got this, it's a major big operation. And here I am, tiny little store. How do I compete with them? And then I started to see that as an obstacle. And then I looked at it and I thought, but hang on, what can I do that these guys can't do because I'm small? Number one, I don't have all the red tape they have. I don't have hundreds of staff members that need to be trained and need to be and can't make decisions because they don't have the free will to make a decision. They have to go back to management before they make a decision. They have to consult each time they try and do something. They can't customize the packages for their contracts because they're too big. They got to follow the rules. They got to stay in the box. Whereas with my small outlet, I could go and visit my clients. I could build custom packages for them. I could sit down with my small team of 2 or 3 salespeople, and we could customize the contracts for them. We could swap out phones. We could give them different options that the bigger stores couldn't do. So we became the go-to people. We could give advice because we had far better knowledge than those guys, because we were small and we could discuss stuff together and we could work together as a team. And so that became one of my biggest assets. That became an advantage for me, whereas before, in my mind, I saw it as an obstacle. But because I changed my view, and I started to see that I was able to take advantage of those opportunities. So in business, we often don't make decisions because of our own views and our own perceived obstacles and liabilities if it's only in our own mind. But if you look at it from a different perspective, you can see, but hang on, how do I turn this obstacle or this liability into an asset moving forward? So now let's get back to the hindsight, insight, and foresight thing. So when we talk about making decisions, how do we make decisions? We make decisions based on the information at hand. When you make a decision, you say to yourself, this is what I know. I've had this experience, so I know this because I've learned this, or I've been told this. I've had this experience in the past, and therefore I'm going to make the decision based on those two things: what I've learned or what I've been told, and what I've experienced. And I make a decision. But that's really just such a small part of what we actually need when we make a decision. So let's look at insight. What is insight? How do I have insight into the decision that I'm making? So in your business, you've got to make a decision. And it could be, am I going to expand? Am I going to sell my business? Am I going to buy something else? Am I going to bring on a new product line? Am I going to refocus my marketing strategy? Am I going to redo my sales strategy? Whatever the decision is going to be. How do I have insight into that decision? So when it comes to insight, there are three areas. Research. So first of all, you're going to look at the decision you're going to make, and you're going to say, so let's research this decision. Let's go and find the information. Let's go online. Let's go and speak to the suppliers. Let's do as much research as I can relating to the decision I'm going to make. Then the second ingredient to the insight component is learning. Let me go and learn about this topic, this decision that I'm going to make. Let me go and learn as much as I can. So I've researched, and I'm going to now learn. I'm going to look at some of the stuff I don't know, and I'm going to learn as much as I can. And then I'm going to take the third component, which is intuition, which is my gut feeling, which is how do I feel about this thing. And I don't want to get all airy-fairy, about feelings and those kind of things. But when you're in business and when you're making decisions and when you're moving forward, you'll get to a point where you start to develop this intuition, this gut feeling. I've researched this thing, I've gone and studied about it, and now I feel that this decision feels right. It feels right to move in that direction. So that's insight. Let's look at hindsight. So hindsight, I don't know if you guys have seen this. All these guys that come on and they want to teach you, they've got this how to make $1 million, how to get a 7-figure business, how to do this and how that, all these steps and that kind of stuff. And all they're doing is they're looking at, and they'll tell you when they're selling the program to you, they'll say that we built our business from 0 to a 7-figure turnover in 1 year. And then they'll show you how. They'll give you the steps and they'll go and teach you. All they're really doing is they're using the hindsight thing, and they're saying, you know what, when we built this business, what are the steps that we took to get to where we are now? You'll often find that they never planned it. It like happened. And then at the end of it, they'll look back and say, okay, in hindsight, what did we do that got us here? And then they try and sell you that formula, and that formula doesn't work because hindsight worked once and it doesn't always work if you don't bring the other ingredients in, the ingredients of insight and the ingredients of foresight. So let's talk about hindsight a little bit. Hindsight is pretty much what happened in the past. When there was a similar situation in the past, what happened? How did it play out? And we all talk about history repeating itself, and that's true to a certain extent. And so when we think about making decisions, and we've gone through the whole insight thing, and we now look in and we touch in on hindsight, we can go and say, all right, so where did this play out before? Or how did a similar situation play out? And it could be my own experiences. It could be something that happened to me in the past. So in the past, when we were faced with this decision, we went and did this, and this is what we did. And then the result of that was X, Y, and Z. So in hindsight, if we do it the same, chances are that we'd end up the same again, or not, depending on whatever's changed in that situation. But we got to go and look at something or someone that's made this decision in the past, and history, and how it happened, and behavior, and culture, and all of that kind of stuff. And you don't have to go into it in too much depth, but you can just think to yourself. And that's why I love watching biographies. I love watching the history of certain brands and businesses. The other day I was watching this documentary on Harley Davidson and how they started up. And when I look at that and all the things they went through, and KFC and McDonald's, and I love watching those kind of things. And I see how they made decisions and how they got to where they are, and the past, how those steps, that gives me the hindsight component. And then I go and look at my own life and how we've tried certain things, and how in the past we tried this and we did this and that didn't work, but this is why it didn't work. So maybe if we change it a little bit now, it could work. And that gives me more information in terms of decision that I'm going to make. And then let's look at the third one, which is foresight. When we think about foresight, it's like, how do I foresee the future play out? So I've got my insight, I've done the research, I've gone and learned some stuff, I've got this gut feeling that this is right. I've looked at the past, I've looked at some of the things that have played out in the past and how it did play out. And now I've got to look at the future and say, all right, so now if I use foresight, and foresight also 3 components. Number 1 is logic. So logic, how do I think this is going to play out? If this happened in the past, and this is the research that I've done, and this is what I've learned now, and this is my feeling, how do I foresee that logically? Is this going to happen logically? And oftentimes people get emotional. You get emotional about the decisions you've got to make. You get emotional about your past and all this stuff that I've just spoken about. And then we forget the logic part. And when we look at it logically, if we put a bit of logic in place, we should never have gone that way. Or definitely, this is how it could play out. This is what is probably going to happen. And then, so after logic, we look at, okay, so logically, this is what the future could hold. Then we look at creativity or influence. How can I influence how the future is going to play out? How can I be creative in terms of making the future play out in a certain way? And you guys know, most of you here are in the crypto space. And if you see how some of the tweets that some of the major influential people put out there, they are manipulating the future. In other words, they're planting seeds out there. They're saying certain things, knowing, because they're influential, that this would cause a certain reaction, and the reaction then would play out in the market in a certain way. They're manipulating the games. You guys, Jason, you're always talking about the whales and the whales coming in, and now they're dumping and they're buying, and they are influencing. So they've gone and looked at all of this stuff. They've gone and thought to themselves, okay, insight, hindsight, and foresight. How could we influence the future? And in business, you can influence the future. I've often seen how I can go in my little world, and I can go and put something in place, a creative way of influencing the future, influencing how my decision's going to play out. So if I'm making a decision to, let's say, I'm making a decision to bring out a new product, if I'm creative in the way I position the product, or I position the need for the product, or even, let's think of, there's such a lacquer story I heard of Andrew Carnegie. So Andrew Carnegie was one of the most wealthiest guys in past, one of the wealthiest people in the world. And a lot of his money he made out of oil and selling oil. So what Andrew Carnegie went and did was he went and got his funds and stuff up and running, and they were all competing. And then he went and he bought all the manufacturers bought out all the manufacturers of the barrels, the wooden barrels that put the oil in. So when you mine oil, the oil then goes into a wooden barrel and it gets transported in the barrel and sold in the barrel. And he went and bought all the manufacturers of barrels, and he stopped supplying his competitors with oil barrels. So these guys took the oil out, and they had no barrels to put them in, so they couldn't ship their oil. He had all the barrels, he put all his oil in, and he took over the market. And he crunched some of those guys. He ended up buying out some of those guys because they went under. Now, you got all of this oil and you can't ship it, so you can't sell it, so you got no money and you go under. So he was creative, and he influenced the market in such a way that he took. I remember when I had the cell phone franchise, I spoke about it earlier. We went and we secured spots in all of the strip malls around us. So we had 4 stores all around us. So we basically monopolized the area. We owned our competition. And so when we put new products on the line, I wouldn't like to say we were doing price fixing, because we weren't, but we had a standard price that we charged. And the client said, oh, you know what, I'm not happy with your price, I'm going to go to the other store. We owned the other store. So we literally... we influenced the whole market in that area. We influenced what products went out, and that was a huge thing. So that's the second part of Foresight. I hope I'm not confusing you with all these 2s and 3s and 3 parts. But the third thing when it comes to Foresight is, and don't shoot me down here, is luck. And I've often heard people say it's the first 3 set letters of luck is Lucifer's name, and it's of the devil and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about just in terms of luck, in terms of positioning and being at the right place at the right time to be able to take up opportunities. So foresight is, first of all, logically, where do I think this thing's going to go? Okay? Being creative in manipulating or creating a product or a solution to a need that could come up. And then positioning myself in right smack dab in the way of that opportunity coming along. In other words, being prepared so that when the opportunity arises, I can capitalize on that opportunity. It's way too late to start preparing when the opportunity is here. We've got to prepare way before the time. You've got to say to yourself, okay, so we can see the future playing out. We can feel that this is where it's logically going. We've created solutions to where we feel the problems are going to be, or the stuff we can solve. And then I need to make sure that when that problem arises, my clients or those people who need me, they can find me in front of their face. I'm showing up on their radar, and I'm there ready to take hold of that opportunity. So when we make decisions, let's get back to the beginning of the whole conversation. When I make decisions on my future and maybe a shift and maybe a change, I've got to look at that. I've got to nail down the insight. I've got to be insightful, do my research, do my studies, do my learning, feel for what I'm wanting to do. I've got to have hindsight. I've got to go and look at how it played out in the past, and what were the mistakes that we made in the past, and what are some of the things we can learn from some of the wins that happened in the past. And then I've got to look at the future and say, logically, how's this going to play out, and what can I create so that I can be in the right place at the right time, and then how do I capitalize on those opportunities. And typically that's how we make decisions. So when it comes to making decisions, we don't just make a decision willy-nilly. We don't just wake up in the morning and because I've got my stomach is grumbling today because I ate some stuff that I shouldn't have last night, so that's why I'm making this decision. We don't play that kind of game or roll the dice or that kind of stuff. We make informed decisions with the information that we have at hand. And guys, it doesn't mean that you've got to go and sit and take months and months to make a decision. You can literally make a decision. These 3 ingredients that I've given you now, make a decision quickly, and your decision would be, I would say, upwards of 70% accurate in terms of moving forward. And the quicker we are to be able to make a decision, do an assessment, make a decision, do a review and a recalculate on the decision, adjust and adapt, and then move. It's like your chart is not going to look like the current Bitcoin chart, but your chart is slowly going to go up and sideways and up and sideways, slowly but surely. Because when we make a decision and we review and we assess and we look at those three things, insight, hindsight, foresight, we can adjust and redo and realign and then slowly move up again. And then when we see it starts going down slightly, then we say, okay, what's going wrong? Hindsight, insight, and foresight, adjust, reposition, new decisions, slowly going up again. And that's literally how easy it is. Daniel, I'd like to have a conversation, like to chat a little bit with you guys. I'd like to get a little bit of inputs from your side in, does it make sense what I've been talking about? Does it help you? Or have I just confused and thrown a whole lot of stuff out here that's really just gone?
Well, yes, I appreciate what you said. I appreciate what you said, and I listened intently. But let's throw it out. I've opened the mics. Any one of you can unmute and tell Carl what you think about what he shared.
Maybe you can share some of your past experiences and some of the decisions that you've made where this has helped you. Hindsight has helped you, or insight has helped you, or foresight. I know that even when you look at trading, and I listen to some of the guys that are trading, logic and common sense almost shows us how what's happened has happened. Looking back now in hindsight, you can almost say, you know what, this was coming. We could have foreseen this coming. Yeah, the black swan events and stuff that happened, but even in that, there are guys that have looked at it and said, you know what, we're watching the indicators, we watching what's happening, we got this gut feel, this intuition, and we were on track. Some guys that made mistakes and lost big time can say, so how do we learn from that? How do we not allow that to happen again? And how do we move forward? How do we grow out of this? How do we learn? All isn't lost. I was listening to Richard talking about on MoneyWeb. He was talking about how people committed suicide because they've just lost it. Everything's gone and they didn't see a way forward. And so that's one of the things that I also want to reiterate today, is that there's always a way forward. No matter how low you are, no matter how bad things are, no matter how things went wrong, there's always a way forward. And if you take those three things, that insight, hindsight, and foresight, and you apply that to your life, you'll find that there's a way forward.
Well, I can 100% agree with you. Insight, a lot of times we have insight in the current situation. A lot of times we have insight into what is happening now, what is around us now. But it's that foresight, that to be able to go and take this information and successfully apply that into looking into the future, into planning, into getting better at that. And I think that for me, with what I've seen in crypto and what has happened in the last year, I've yesterday plotted it against the 2017 high. And it's so clear now with hindsight that our $69,000 in October, November was a high for this season. And I should have gone out of my crypto portfolio, which I did not. Just use crypto as an example. And with everything in life, if we have, most of the times we have insight, we have a specific level, a certain level of insight because we live in that, with that fact, with that information at that moment. But that hindsight, we have to apply to get to that foresight part. And I think we must focus more on foresight. We must focus more on looking into what is coming, what is happening. And I am definitely in the process of reassessing my foresight, my looking forward position for myself in my business and for myself as a person.
So also just bear in mind that when it comes to foresight, there were three things I spoke about. I spoke about the logic, and then I spoke about creating or innovating or influencing the future. And we spoke about, now foresight is something that we can, even though you've got all those three things in place and you've done all your research, your insight and your hindsight, all that kind of stuff, there's still a measure of risk. Okay? And so when we make decisions, we need to understand the risk, and we also need to understand the level of risk that I'm prepared to take. And so you'll find that a lot of people in business based on logic, based on influence, based on luck and all that kind of stuff. They don't make big decisions. They might not make risky decisions. They might make safe decisions. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I just want to say to you that when you do make a decision, do what you feel comfortable on. Don't take unnecessary risks and don't put everything on the line. Yeah, you listen to guys like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and those guys, and they put everything on the line, and it worked for them. I don't know if I've got the I nearly said a wrong word there, but I don't know if I've got
tenacity.
That's the one I was looking for. To be able to make that everything on the line decision, because I've got a family, I've got responsibilities, I've got a little bit of fear as well. So I would be a little bit more inclined to take the logical route and say, logically, is this going to happen? No, that's too high of a risk, so I'm not going to take that risk. But logically, can I control the environment? Can I influence the environment? Is my creativity something that can, influence the outcome of this thing? And then how do I position myself to be able to capitalize on that? A very good coach, one of my coaches, one of my mentors, Hannes, he always talks about managing risk, and he always says that if you cannot control it, you don't even look at it. You need to be in total control all the time. There's the minute someone else is in control, the risk is too high. And I appreciate that. So I just want to, again, just reiterate that, is that we make different decisions based on all that information, but we also got to bear in mind, what is the risk? Am I prepared to risk all of this? And if it doesn't work out, what am I going to lose, and how do I recover from that? And how am I going to monitor, so measure, so that I can quickly adjust? Because you guys know, you buy a certain stock, or you invest in a certain portfolio or a certain product, and you need to put measures in place, stop losses in place, so that you can watch and track that. And the minute it starts to dip, you can take action quickly, and you can change and alter and make a decision there and then. That's also part of that whole logical thing in terms of decisions.
Open the microphones. Anyone that would like to add something? No pressure.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Stephen, we can.
Thanks very much. Carl, I think this is really great. I love this process. I love the clarity of it. You said, was it confusing? To me, it wasn't confusing. I'm certainly going to look at the recording, and I'm going to go through it again. And like I said, I'm going to apply to a couple of business decisions that I have to make. So thank you. I think it's a really timeless share. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. I'm glad it made sense.
Thanks for a great session. I really enjoyed it as well. Yeah, I cannot add more. I just can reiterate. I think experience forms your logic and your common sense, which makes a great deal of the decision making process. I think that's why two people will make take a different action to solve the same problem, which is important for me to look at other people on how they acted on the decision they made. That's why they said, like for instance, using crypto again, never invest money that you cannot afford to lose. Yet there are so many people that commit suicide, or people put in life savings into crypto hoping to be a millionaire by tomorrow. And it's the mistake that happens over and over, but for some reason people don't take into consideration what happened in the past.
Thank you, Willie. And then just
Col, if I can just add there on something that Willie said. One thing that I absolutely realized in the last 3-4 weeks with regards to crypto is I had always had a fear of losing out on growth. And I sometimes stayed in coins and sometimes lowered stop losses, sometimes did not even add stop losses, because I was always fearful of losing out when there's a rise in price, where there's profit to be made. And my fear for losing out and making profit vested actual losses. And I had to go and reassess my position, and I'm congruent and honest with you, with every one of you here today. And that is, I had to go and look into this and say, now taking forward, not going to allow any fear of losing out on a price going up, but I'm going to minimize my risk of price going down. And for me, that's a whole philosophy change. I know for you, it sounds simple. It sounds as if it's nothing that I'm contributing here, But in my mind, in my philosophy of looking at my portfolio, as I sit here, looking at my portfolio because I was busy with this before the meeting started, and I will continue with it after this meeting. And the key is, I will not ever allow fear for not sharing in the price going up allow me to make any any investment decision for that, but in crypto, because I found that the biggest risks I've ever taken was, for me, allowing the risk of losing out on gains in a coin. That influenced me more than the risk of losing capital for not getting out of the coin. And so yes, for me, definitely with what you're saying, with the three elements, looking at that just from that perspective, it's a whole new ball game for me.
Thank you, Daniel. And what often happens is we bring our own biases to the decision-making process. Vili, you spoke about, especially about looking at the past and looking at other people and and how the decisions they've made, and that kind of stuff. So oftentimes you'll find that people make a decision only based on their own experiences. This always happens to me, or this is what I learned, because our history is based on everything you've ever experienced, everything you've ever been taught, and every influence that's ever come your way. So you've been taught stuff by people that you've given authority to in your life, your parents, your grandparents, your pastors, your teachers at school, your mentors. So we've given those guys power, and we've given them authority, and we've taken a lot of what they said as truth. Then we've combined that with every experience I've ever had, and then we've said to ourselves, that's it, that's the truth. And that's why the second thing I spoke about, the insight thing, the research and the learning is so important, because everything I've ever experienced and everything that's ever been taught to me by those people in my past is not necessarily true. It could be completely false, because it's based on what back then. Look at this, the crap we were taught at school, even in the church, the nonsense we were taught back then. It's totally different now, because there's new understanding that's come out. So it's really important for you to include all three aspects: the insight, the hindsight, and the foresight in making decisions in that.
I call the insight part is more important than we think, because we live in this specific time with the insight of this specific time. We should take the insight and not just the hindsight. Yep. Agree. Cool. Jason, it seems like you are on the mute button there.
Hello. Yeah, just two things that came to mind there, Carl. You spoke around cryptocurrencies and always speak around the whales. The one thing with the whales are they late to the party. Bitcoin's been around for 12 years now, and they now recently joined the party, but they're late to the party. So their strategy is how they're going to take the Bitcoin away from us, as in the retail. And they do it by creating fear in the market. And that's the way that the strategies that they apply in order to actually buy and sell in the market by creating fear. And right now we're in a fearful phase. Yeah. You know, people are selling in crypto, but the whales are buying it up. And that's a strategy they have applied.
So you see what they've done is they've looked at logic. They've said, logically, if we influence the market, logically, this is what's going to happen. So let's position ourselves in a place where when this happens, because we've influenced it, we can buy it up or we can sell.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can apply that same stuff in our lives and in our businesses as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, makes sense. It's been awesome spending time with you as a coach and as a teacher. Daniel, you'll be able to attest. In fact, all of you can. We learn so much in doing sessions like this. In fact, I learn more than what you guys learn in presenting like this. So I love this. I love the conversations and the figuring out and the reasoning and the feedback from you guys, because these sessions are incredibly valuable to me. So thank you for that. Daniel, thank you for creating this space. It's awesome. I heard you say that maybe we must rethink because of the amount of people that come on, but yeah, maybe we need to just rethink making the group bigger rather than stopping the sessions, because I get a lot of value out of these sessions.
Thank you, Cole. Yes, me too. And thank you for an insightful conversation stirrer this morning, getting us thinking. And I see that Stephen Bard will talk about Johari's window, about ourselves and our blind spots. And you know what Johari's window is teaching us, that I don't know what I don't know until I know that I don't know that.
Yeah.
And then I know that I know it. And eventually I don't know that I know it anymore because I do it out of just with subconsciously. But there's a lot of things about ourselves and our way of thinking that we don't know it yet. And that's why these conversations are so important. So thank you, Paul, for enlightening us around the stuff that we don't know it, so that we go spend time on getting to know it, so that we know that in the end, we won't even know that we know it. We will use it like driving a car without thinking about the clutch. So thank you, guys. Thank you for everyone participating. Thank you for everyone being on the call. It was lucky to see a few of the names here. Sandile, I haven't seen you for some time. Thank you for visiting us. I know you're very busy in your auditing practice. But ladies and gentlemen, it was great meeting with you again.
Before we go, Sandile was just asking, where does he find the recordings for the sessions?
I normally don't post the recordings, but I will post today's recording. And I will post it on the Crypto School free stuff, but I will also post it on the YouTube channel, the Crypto School YouTube channel. So I will go render this one and go and post it because you were so good, Cole.
Thank you, Daniel.
Cool. Thank you, team.
Have a wonderful week. See you next month.